G'day mates, it's Busta here, and I would like to give Thrive Market a huge shout out for sponsoring this episode. So, a few weeks back, I actually became a Thrive Market member, and Thrive Market is basically an online membership-based market on a mission to make healthier living easy and affordable to everyone. And I've actually previously ordered one of their custom meat and seafood boxes, and also their primal buffalo sauce to restock some of the cupboards at my place, and to give the sauce a try too. And let me tell you, the sauce was great. And plus, I really enjoyed cooking some of the meat on the barbecue outside as we've been heading into spring here in Australia, and the weather is starting to improve at least. And honestly, it's been great enjoying the convenience of ordering items from home and having them delivered. And I'm confident that once you try Thrive Market, you'll love it as much as I do. And one of the reasons I would highly recommend Thrive Market is the savings. You can enjoy guaranteed savings and member-only prices by joining today as well. And Thrive Market members save an average of $32 on every order, which adds up really quickly. And one of the great initiatives that they have going on at the moment too is when you join, Thrive has a 1-for-1 membership matching program, so every paid membership sponsors a free one for a low-income family, which I personally think is great. So, go to thrivemarket.com/scared, join today, and you'll get a free gift of your choosing up to $24 in value. That's THRIVE market.com/scared to start your risk-free membership and get a free gift today. thrivemarket.com/scared. One evening, about 5 years ago I'd say now, I travelled to Loch Ness with a friend to see the loch and the surrounding area. We had planned on arriving by afternoon, spend the evening, then head to the hotel when it got dark, and that was perfect. Well, we got there too with no problems, and we spent the day together just taking in the beautiful landscape. The moon began to rise, and so we decided it was time to head back as we had spent the majority of the day there. As my friend began to drive back, she went around a sharp bend, and I mean the word to its very meaning. She narrowly avoided a man standing on the edge. She was quite understandably in shock and slammed the brakes in sheer panic. She began to pant, verging on hyperventilation as I tried to calm her down. She had actually believed that she had hit the man when she swerved. Thankfully, though, the man was okay, as we later learned, because he walked towards the car and apologized for standing so near the road. After he tried to make some small talk with repeated apologies, he showed me 2 pictures and asked if I knew who the people were because he was trying to track them down. It was dark, so I switched the light on and quickly glanced and then said I didn't. I showed my friend, and she just shook her head without properly looking. She was still in shock. The man didn't ask for the photos back, nor did that conversation go any further. He apologized again and wished us a good night. Without realizing, I joked that we would be better back at the hotel. He laughed and then he just walked off, didn't take the pictures. And so, we just drove off too. When we were in the hotel room, I looked at the 2 pictures more attentively this time, and when I did, I felt sick to the pit of my stomach. Because one of the pictures was of me and my friend stood at the water's edge overlooking the loch with my arm wrapped around her. The picture had actually been taken from behind us. The second picture was one of me and my friend walking together, our faces clearly seen. That picture was taken from the side, but it must have been done in a wooded area too, because you could see the branches sort of. We both sat for about an hour with the pictures in our fingertips, just sort of speechless. I tried to remember the man, but I couldn't remember any features because of the darkness, besides a beard, I think, and glasses, and also that he was soft-spoken. And later that night, I was awoken by my friend, who was screaming frantically. When I ran into the room, she said that a man with glasses was watching her through the window. And at that, we packed up and we left pretty quickly. I've never been back to the Loch Ness since then, and honestly, I don't intend to. So my mum, my dad and my big sister and I were on holiday at a big family-style resort in the 90s. For context too, this actually happened somewhere in a South American country. Now, I've told this story so many times too, but I don't want to dox myself by giving away too many details, so please forgive me if something doesn't quite make sense. But for context, I actually have no recollection of this event, but I do remember parts of the holiday: the sea, the white sand, the banana trees. The four of us were actually staying at one of those classic family hotels, the ones where the buffet breakfast has eggs, bacon, fresh fruits, and pancakes galore. The type where there are also lots of kids and lots of animation for them. There was a kids club too where I could go, and I remember making a friend there too, a little boy about my age. Unfortunately though, that's all I sort of really remember, and the rest is all from my dad's recounting. So, we were in the hotel playing area, my parents and I. A woman working for the hotel, part of the kids club animation team, was playing with me, and I was a cute little shy blonde kid. She started playing with me and talking to me. My parents relax, enjoy their holiday knowing that their daughter is being entertained by the kids club staff. All good, right? Until my dad turns around and sees that I'm missing. I'm not next to them. The woman playing with me is also nowhere in sight too. With Papa Bear reflexes, my dad stands up to see that the woman is walking slowly but surely across the hotel with his daughter in her arms. He begins chasing her down the hotel and she takes up some speed, beginning to run with me. This was a vast complex though, so there was a long way to go. But my dad says that he ran after her through doors which she would close in his nose, and by a stroke of luck, he managed to catch up with her just before she made it to the side exit and pulled me out of her hands. In shock, he grabbed me and ran back, letting the woman disappear into a forest nearby. Immediately, my parents went to the hotel to complain and let them know either their staff or somebody pretending to be their staff tried to kidnap me. The hotel, unfortunately, brushed this off casually and said, "Oh, don't worry about that. This happens sometimes." Crazy, right? Anyway, I hope this hotel has changed since the 90s, but it really makes me think just how messed up it was that the hotel just didn't seem to care. In fact, it was almost like they were in on it too somehow. When I was in 6th grade, I was in a band, clarinet. I wanted to play saxophone, but Grandpa had a clarinet, so that's what it ended up being. The band instructor was a middle-aged woman who I'm going to refer to as Mrs. Frond. I'm watching Bob's Burgers while writing this, so as to protect her identity. Anyways, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, so I had a lot of extra lessons after school. After a while, she started offering me extra lessons at her house, and even then that made me uncomfortable and I just refused. She was pretty persistent though, and would offer at least once a week, and eventually I just stopped going back altogether for extra lessons. And one day Miss Frond announced that we had been invited to be in the Christmas parade downtown. Awesome, that's great, I thought. The school is literally a year old, it's great for exposure, and best of all, it was going to be fun. We were really excited too. We all had extra rehearsals and the school made sure that we had whatever we needed. Permission slips were soon signed and everything went perfectly. The day of the parade, we all meet at our designated area. As we get dropped off, Miss Frond tells the parents where to pick us up at the end, and her and some parade officials were the ones watching over us after they left. The parade starts and everything goes smoothly, at least from my perspective. I was so nervous though that there could have been a 5-float pile-up and I wouldn't have noticed. But at the end, everyone gets picked up and I'm the last one left alone with Miss Frond. And Miss Frond immediately grabs my arm after the last kid is out of sight and tells me that I can call my mum from her house, and she starts booking it, me in tow. I had very little experience being on my own, and I really didn't know how to act in this kind of situation, so despite the fact that I had recently been uncomfortable around her, I just sort of went along with it. Well, looking back, It probably didn't look that unusual to anyone because she wasn't tall and I really shot up in 6th grade, so it's not like I was being dragged or anything. In fact, I kept up pretty well. I couldn't tell you two where in particular that she took me, but it was definitely further out than where everyone else was parked. Her car is the only one in sight, and she starts a beeline towards it. It was one of those dark blue-green SUVs that pretty much everyone had in the late 90s. And suddenly, I hear my name being yelled behind me. I turn and I see my mum panting and sprinting towards us. Miss Fron's grip tightens and she speeds up. And eventually, Mum yanked me from Miss Fron's grip and, without a word, took me to her car and we went home where she proceeded to fawn over me, which was confusing because I was pretty much ignored like 99% of the time. I guess I just had no idea what had happened. After that too, I never saw Miss Frond again in school or heard anything about her ever again. In fact, I don't even know her first name to look her up, and my family, they never really spoke about her ever again. My mum's side of the family used to have a small cabin in the woods in the Pocono Mountains, surrounded by trees. But it wasn't like a fancy cabin or anything with a hot tub. More like a very small hunting cabin built by my late grandfather and my uncles as well. It had a small porch with a picnic bench, a gravel lot to park in, and maybe 15 feet away a nice-sized fire pit with a bench and a few logs around it. The driveway was a very long drive up the side of a mountain off a very secluded highway. The house was small, but the land they owned was pretty big. We had a neighbour too, but he was maybe half a mile away, maybe a bit closer, I'm not too sure, but we couldn't see them through the woods and rarely heard them except for maybe some gunshots during hunting season. You could hear the occasional car on the highway, but otherwise, the house was just kind of in the middle of nowhere. So, we used to always spend time up there when we were younger with all of our cousins. However, just me and my family would go up every once in a while in the summer too. We would go hiking and visit the local amusement park, and have big bonfires and roast marshmallows and cook burgers. And at night we would walk further down the driveway towards the highway, where the trees weren't as close together so we could see the stars. And without all that light pollution, you could seriously see just about everything. And all in all, it was just a great time. Anyway, so one summer when I was maybe 13, our family of 5 took a trip up there, my family being me, my 2 older sisters, my mum and my dad. I used to be, still am, afraid of the dark, and especially the woods in the dark. So I would really only go outside if one of my siblings or parents were with me, which they usually were. Now one night, we light the bonfire and we're talking and roasting marshmallows and enjoying the summer night. I was pretty tired from whatever we had done earlier in the day, so I decided to join my mum inside on the couch. I ended up falling asleep in the living room. I woke up, I can only assume a few hours later, upset that I fell asleep and missed the rest of the fire. I pulled aside the curtains to check if anyone was still outside. From the window, I can see the fire pit clearly still ablaze, and what I assume is my dad sitting on the bench by himself out there. Not wanting my dad to be alone, I decided that I would go and join him. Now, I am not lying when I say that I sincerely hate the dark. Even though the fire pit wasn't terribly far, that walk still felt long in the pitch black. I don't know what possessed me to go outside without looking for any other members of my family, or even checking the time. But I opened the door and I step out onto the porch and called to my dad to ask why he's still there. The pit was maybe 15-20 feet away, but he would have heard me in the night for sure. I can clearly see the fire pit, and I can clearly see my dad, even though he was sitting on the bench on the opposite side of the fire. Confused though, I start to walk down the steps and then slowly towards the fire pit, asking my dad why he wasn't responding. As I get closer and as I keep calling for him, I realize that while I should be hearing the roar of the fire, there's just absolute and complete ringing silence. And then I notice that there's no one sitting on the bench anymore. At this point, I'm only a few feet away from the fire and the bench. My blood immediately turned ice cold, and I whipped around and sprinted back up to the house, not daring to stop or look behind me. I locked the door and ran into my dad's bedroom, only to find him under his blankets, asleep. I didn't want to wake him up to let him know how stupid I was, but I just crawled under the covers beside him and I prayed to just fall asleep. The next morning, I told my parents what happened. My mum keeps telling me that it was just a dream, but I woke up from a dream on the couch right before and then went outside when this all happened. I used to have the same reoccurring dream every time that we went up to that cabin, and I would only have that dream when I was at the cabin. I specifically remember having this very same dream again and then waking up on the couch. This same creepy dream is the same reason I always slept next to my dad anytime that we stayed at the mountains too. I never felt safe sleeping by myself. That meant that my mum would share a bed with my older sister. They both snored, so it was fine. But my dad tells me that it's just not possible, because he always deadbolts the door before he goes to sleep, and there was no way that I would have been able to push the deadbolt open without waking him up. And two, because he always puts the fire out before bed as well. Basic fire safety, which I get. All I know is that I know what I saw, and I know that it wasn't a dream. And all I can hope for is that you guys also don't think that I'm crazy.